Welcome back to Pain to Power PT. I'm Dr. Ronnie, and today I am going to be continuing on the topic of flare-ups. So last video, I talked about an overview of flare-ups and managing flare-ups and plans to have in place for when a flare-up hits you. So today I am going to be delving in a little bit deeper to my own flare-up plan and management, and I'm going to use my most recent flare-up as sort of the case study to kind of walk you through how someone might manage a flare-up more specifically. So my flare-up sort of officially began about 9 days ago. It was a Friday night just before bed, and as I talked about in my last video, sometimes we attribute a flare-up to one particular action, or there's sort of one final drop in the teacup that sort of throws you over the edge. And that final drop for me was I was sitting on the floor and I stood up wrong. I kind of tweaked my hip, or however you want to say that. And that was sort of the precipitating event for me that stood out most in my head as sort of the official start. But underneath the surface, the things that were going on for me, the things that sort of filled up my teacup, were I was having a lot of stress about work. I had a few deadlines. I also had a work event earlier that day that I was a little bit stressed about, and I also had a few social situations that were a little bit uncomfortable to deal with, and then I was not eating very well. I was kind of eating a lot of sugar and processed foods more recently, and overall I was having a lot of stress, and I think that the weather was kind of starting to get to me as well, lack of sunlight and lack of being outside, and I just think that I was kind of falling prey to winter blues or seasonal affective. So that was all of the things that I think were kind of combining. I was just having a lot of stress on my body, on my mind, and I wasn't really practicing mindfulness. In hindsight, looking back, I was able to see that there were multiple days or situations where I was having more discomfort. I was kind of noticing like a little bit of discomfort in my back, a little discomfort in my hip, but I was ignoring it. So I wasn't being very proactive or very mindful about taking care of myself, and so kind of relieving some of the tea that was in my teacup. I just kept filling it without emptying any of it. So all of those things culminated together to kind of lead to this final point that was sort of the official start of this flare-up. So that was day one. It was in the evening. Day two, I woke up. I was having quite high back and hip pain. Luckily, it was a Saturday, so I was able to just kind of rest that whole day. I was not very physically active that day, but I just kind of stayed at home, had sort of like a lazy day, used a heat pad, and was just kind of inactive that day. The next day was Sunday, day 3. I then wrote up my flare-up recovery plan. So I sat down, I did some journaling, I did some reflecting on kind of what led to this flare-up now that I was able to clearly identify, like, I am having a flare-up. This is day 2 where I'm having a lot more pain. So I wrote my plan down, and I did a short 20-minute walk on the treadmill, which was a little uncomfortable, but it was completely manageable. It didn't make anything worse overall. So that was my day 3 in a nutshell. Day 4, I did a little bit more physical activity. I did a restorative yoga class. So I teach a yoga class, a restorative yoga class every other Monday in our clinic, and I participated in that. So restorative yoga, if you're not familiar with that, is a very slow, kind of calming style of yoga. It's not the very bendy, stretchy, or very intense or difficult positions. It's a very supportive form of yoga, uses lots of props and things like that. So it helps you get into positions where you are able to relax your body into a stretch, and it's not very stressful for your body. There's a lot of meditation and mindfulness. So I did that. I also set aside dedicated time to meditate that day, to journal, and I also arranged for a couple kid-free days. I have a 5-year-old, so having time that I didn't have to take care of him while I was in a flare-up, and I could just focus on myself and focus on some other social positive things, was sort of that social aspect for me that was beneficial in my flare-up plan. I also did some other biological based things that I think helped with my flare-up recovery. I really sat down and got all of my vitamins and supplements in order as far as what helps me the most. So for me, some of those things are vitamin B6, magnesium, taking extra magnesium to help my body relax and help my mind relax too. And I also got a vitamin D shot because I think with not having as much sunlight, like I said, I think the season was kind of starting to affect me, and I got a B12 shot, which I normally get every week anyways. So that was my Monday, sort of in a nutshell. I did work that day as well, so I wasn't, passive at home. And then that's day 4. Day 5 was a Tuesday, and that day I really focused in on meditation and journaling, and I did a 15-minute walk outdoors on kind of some hilly terrain. And I also had a Myers IV with a glutathione push at the end, so that's a detoxer. And I got that because I really felt like I had not been drinking enough water, and I really wanted like a quick hydration boost. So I feel like that really helped me a lot. And I was feeling actually much better that day by the end of the day. So that's flare up day 5. I was feeling like much more confident and like, okay, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I felt a lot better. Day 6, I did another 15-minute walk outside, and by that time, I was pretty much 90% pain-free. I was working that day again, and I was feeling much, much better. I was still focusing on some of the meditation style things, but was mostly just focused on work that day and not too much of my flare-up recovery plan because I was feeling so much better. Then the day 7, I did a 45-minute walk outside on hilly terrain again, which was really great. I was feeling so much better. I didn't have my kid the second half of the day, so my husband and I were able to kind of just spend some time together, go out to eat, stuff like that. So that kind of met that social aspect need of the recovery plan that I talked about in my last video. And I was feeling much better. So went to bed that night like normal, still taking all my extra supplements and everything to kind of help my body be as supported on the biological aspect as possible. And Friday, I woke up, I felt pretty darn good. So I decided to do a bunch of extra yoga and hip stretches, which was not helpful. So this is the part that I always recommend to people when they are feeling better after their flare-up, that they do a review. I'm giving you my review right now of my whole flare-up management plan, and this was not helpful to me. So I kind of jumped back in a little bit too quickly. I did some deep hip stretches, and it was a little bit too intense for me coming right back on day 8. So I also spent most of the rest of the day, pretty much all the day, on my feet, which also was probably not the best idea. So by the time I got home from everything that I was doing on Friday, I was pretty sore again. So that was not great. But ultimately, I didn't push myself so hard that it affected my overall flare-up recovery, because when I woke up again on day 9 on Saturday, I felt much better again. I actually kind of tested out my hip range of motion, my back range of motion, and I have now re-achieved my full range of motion through pain-free movement. So that is good. So even though I overdid it just a little bit a couple days ago, I was able to kick back in. So that's something to think about when you're looking back too, as to not get caught up in that downward spiral if you do end up doing something during your recovery plan that maybe wasn't the wisest decision, that you can come back from it still. So, and then that leaves us on today. Today is day 10. So my plan moving forward at this point is to look at my review, which is what I'm walking you through right now, and then to focus on self-care and mindfulness, because I think being unmindful was one of the major things that led me to my flare-up. If I had caught it earlier, if I had been paying attention to my body more, I probably wouldn't have had a flare-up at all. And a gradual return to my prior level of function, so that's going to include things like daily walks, and gradually building up my tolerance again, and doing yoga and stretching, as well as some hip strengthening, because for the past 9 or 10 days or so, my activity level has been less than usual. There is going to be some natural little bit of deconditioning. So I need to kind of work on some areas of my body that maybe my strength is not where it was a couple weeks ago. In general, other things that kind of helped me through my flare-up management that I didn't mention on like a specific day, because it was kind of every day, was that I chose specific kinds of seating that were very supportive. So normally I like to sit on the floor, but during my flare-up, I very often did not sit on the floor. I picked comfortable chairs and couches and things like that kept me in a more neutral position and a supported position. I also used some comfort items like heating pads and just extra support from pillows and things like that. And I got extra sleep. So I really paid attention to my sleep schedule and made sure that I was allowing myself enough time for sleep and to sleep in or oversleep on certain days where I was able to do that. And I also maintained basic self-care. So I didn't let some of the basics fall off to the side, like showering and getting dressed every day. So I didn't stay in my PJs and, forget to brush my teeth and all that stuff. So I just maintained all of the normal basic self-care things without letting those kind of fall off to the side. And then also really focusing on my mindset. So, anytime that I noticed myself getting into a little bit of like self-shaming about having a flare-up or not paying attention, even though I know better or whatever, I really nipped that in the bud as soon as I recognized that I was doing it, and instead focused my attention on the progress that I was making and the progress that I was seeing. And that is something that when you have a flare-up plan is easier to see, because if you're tracking your progress, you'll be able to see it versus spiraling into this, oh my gosh, everything is terrible because I had this flare up. So focusing and acknowledging the small gains and not freaking out about those possible little mistakes that you either made to cause the flare-up or to lead to the flare-up, or things that maybe you added in too quickly during your flare-up management plan. And then finally, rewarding myself. So I have been saving up some money to kind of fix up some things in my living room. So one of the days towards the end there, I did go out and kind of rewarded myself with being able to do a little upgrade to my living room. So that was kind of my little reward. So that was sort of my process and my step through my flare-up management. I would love to hear what is included in your flare-up management plan. So what kinds of things work for you? What have you noticed maybe doesn't work for you? Mistakes that you may have made along the way that you've corrected, and what overall are things that work best for you? And also, I would love to hear more about what you want to hear more about. So if there are certain topics or ideas that you want to hear more about, or certain information that you'd like, let me know in the comments. And thank you for watching.